Corporate loyalty is dying right now, and it's the employees who are suffering the most because of it. True enough, there's two sides to every story, and we will be looking at this from both an employee's perspective and an employer's perspective, which makes sense because it can go one of two ways. It's either the loyalty of the company to the employee, or the loyalty of the employee to the company. This topic has been covered and commented on numerous times throughout the mainstream national media, along with numerous employees commenting and speaking out on platforms such as Reddit and LinkedIn on their experiences with disloyalty. So let's start this off by looking at this through the lens of an employee and analysing why employees are no longer loyal to companies. Well, straight away I can tell you that loyal workers feel like they're being exploited. A recent study released by Duke Today shows that managers exploit their loyal workers over some of their less committed employees for additional job tasks or even unpaid work. Companies want loyal workers, and there's a ton of research showing that loyal workers provide all sorts of positive benefits to companies. But it seems like managers are more apt to target them for exploitative practices. So essentially what that study is saying is that if you're a loyal worker, you're more likely to get walked all over by your managers and your bosses. And this study is damning. Just listen to some of the words used here. Managers preyed on loyal workers. The price to pay for being loyal. Employers' exploitative practices. But hang on a second, loyalty to a company, that's got to count for something, right? You've got to be compensated for that or get a salary increase come the end of the year, surely. Sadly, that doesn't appear to be the case. Let's have a read of this. According to Business Insider, the salary gap between new hires and current employees is 7% nationally, meaning new employees earn approximately 7% more than existing employees in comparable positions. The article then goes on to explicitly say that loyal employees who are not leaving are getting the short end of the stick, meaning that they're the ones who are taking the hit with their salary for their loyalty and their hard work. So just by that study alone, it's no wonder that employees are not being loyal anymore, because what does it mean? It means that you're going to be taken advantage of either on purpose or accidentally by your employer. And that's awful news, because logic, common sense logic, tells us that if you're loyal to something or to someone, you would hope, or you should think, that they should reciprocate that loyalty back to you. In the case of a company, you'd think you're going to get some sort of commendation or a pay rise for doing all this extra work, for showing your loyalty. But there's no incentive to do that anymore, because we're now in a period where mass layoffs are happening everywhere. And in terms of loyalty, it means that even job security is now under threat as well. There is an ever-increasing gap in terms of a relationship between the top senior level leadership and the workers who make up the bottom half of the company. It seems that CEOs and senior executive leadership members are now making a lot of money with companies growing rapidly and making more in terms of their profits, but workers towards the bottom half of the company are now getting laid off in their thousands. Just have a read of this extract from ABC News. The rise of CEO pay amid a cascade of job losses at some household name tech firms draws attention to the divergent fates of executives and workers in one of the nation's most lucrative fields, which matches an economy-wide trend of a widening gap between the pay of CEOs and workers. So immediately right there's a clear indicator as to why the loyalty that employees have to their employers and their companies is not as strong as it should be. Of course, if a company's performing well and is going in the right direction with making good profit, then it makes sense that the senior leadership and the CEOs should get pay rises. But what's baffling to me now is that the lower half of the workforce is now suffering the consequences of being laid off to fund those pay rises. And that's regardless of whether these employees have had good years or not. Some of them may have had terrific years. They may have hit all their corporate goals. They may have hit all their personal targets. And they're still being laid off. I completely recognise that it's up to the senior leadership team to make the corporate executive decisions for where the company should go, and it should be that way, it should remain that way, because they're getting paid that level of money for making those decisions to impact not only their presence in their industry, but also their workforce. So I completely recognise that. But if you're a lower level worker, and you give 110% every single time you go on shift and still get laid off, well, what's the point? It's no wonder that employee loyalty is dying out, because the employers are just laying them off anyway, regardless of performance. Now, I've read and heard some of the reasons being listed as to why these mass layoffs are happening, and one common one that I've seen all across the media is overhiring. There's a video going around on TikTok that's offering a very interesting perspective on this. Let's take a listen.
So I really need an answer and an explanation as to why Brittany Peach is getting let go, not why Cloudflare decided to hire too many people and are now actually realizing that they can't afford this many people and they're letting that go. If that's the real answer, I would rather just you tell me that instead of making up and telling me that right before I lose my job from someone that I've never met before, if you can respect that.
Wow, we'll talk about straight to the point. I think her point about the overhiring of candidates is absolutely bang on the money. If you've gone on a massive recruitment surge and hired so many people that you're now feeling the financial strain of having so many people in your workforce, you should look at who made the decision to hire so many people in the first place. That's not even to mention if you live in the US, the way healthcare is being weaponized against you is astonishing. I mean, just look at this for a statement. After wages and salary, employers spend more on health insurance than any other employee benefit. As if that was bad enough, the premiums attached to those healthcare costs for workers has risen by 7% in 2023 because of higher inflation. So I completely agree with Brittany Peach. Why are you overhiring when the costs are already stacked against you? And again, that ties back into the original point why so many employees don't feel a sense of loyalty to their companies anymore, because they don't really feel like they're being valued or treated well. But to understand why this happens, we now have to flip the switch entirely here and put ourselves in the shoes of the employer. There is a method to this madness, because you've got to recognize employers and companies didn't get to where they are now in terms of being these huge companies with a massive global presence without having some strategy in place. It may look like madness to all of us initially on the outside, but to those internally and the senior leadership team of those companies, here are some reasons as to why they operate the way they do and don't necessarily reciprocate the kind of loyalty that employees show to them. History tells us that if you want to try and make progress, not every job can be saved. Let's go back quite a number of years to VHS videotapes. Back when they were the only thing on the market, VHS videotapes, everyone wanted them, so it was a booming sector. Then, along came DVDs. Everyone started to move and migrate towards DVDs, meaning fewer sales in the VHS sector. And then, in this day and age, we have streaming services, like Netflix. Now, more or less everyone's streaming their services, fewer people are using DVDs, and absolutely no one is using VHS, meaning that the VHS side of companies is no longer profitable, and as such, workers within that sector no longer exist. That's just a cold, hard reality of the way the world works. It's called creative destruction. And in this day and age, because many employers, especially in the tech sector, have ambitions to drive forward, they are now turning their heads and their attention to AI. AI is the new form of automation, and tech companies are now reinvesting the labor costs that they have saved from these layoffs into their AI efforts. So from an employer's perspective, if they're reinvesting their efforts into AI, they won't really be thinking too much about employee welfare and employee loyalty, because they'll have the end goal in mind to replace all of them with AI. It's a harsh reality, but it's the way that I see it going, it's the way others around me see it going, it's the way many high-profile people see it going. AI is here to stay, and it will be a very powerful tool for employers moving forward, so it'll be interesting to watch that trend over the coming years. Another reason for employers being less loyal is that there's an increasing pool of talent to choose from. If employers have candidates from all over the world vying for the same positions, then they're less likely to put a premium on company loyalty as opposed to finding the best of the best for that particular position. Because of course, companies want the best people, not necessarily the most loyal people. Because of the internet, social media, the rise of remote working, it's so much easier for employers to go out there and find the best people, regardless of where they may be located. This large abundance of skills has sort of reduced the need for companies to retain their loyal employees and train them up, because there's a ready-made candidate in the wings. This next one may be me stating the obvious, but the survival of the company comes first. Granted, if a company's doing very well for itself, then it's a different story entirely, but if times are tough and profits are low, there's a chance that the company could go bankrupt. Then ensuring the survival of the company comes first, and that's when tough decisions are made. It can result in numerous things: selling offices, selling off assets, and of course, laying off workers. So if it comes down to ensuring survival, loyalty goes out the window. What good is loyalty if there's no company to be loyal to? And this last one may seem very brutal, but it's very true. Employers are well within their rights to lay us off if they so wish. If you signed up to at-will employment, it basically means you can leave the company whenever you want, or the company can let you go whenever they want. It's brutal and a little bit cold, but it's actually 100% legal. Plus, for large companies like Microsoft and Meta, their mass layoffs resulted in mass profits. So it comes down to, where do they see their priorities? Do they see their priorities in rewarding their employees and their loyal staff, or do they see their priorities in generating profit and higher revenue? That decision ultimately rests with the senior leadership team, and again, rightly so, because they're the ones who get paid to make the big decisions. As far as a conclusion is concerned, I don't think it's out there to say that the workplace is extremely fractured right now. More so than it has been for a long time, especially over the last 3 years. And unfortunately, I don't believe we've seen the end of these mass layoffs either, so not much will be done in the short term for repairing that relationship between employee and employer. If you are an employee, all I would say is, please don't allow yourself to be taken advantage of without seeing some level of compensation for doing any extra work or any extra tasks that may be given to you. Take it upon yourself to make sure your hard work gets recognized by making sure you ask for something in exchange for your hard work, overtime or with extra tasks. I'll be bringing out some more content on this particular issue because I, like many of you, share a concern as to where we're headed with the employee-employer relationship. But in such an uncertain world, please make sure to take care of yourselves, look after your physical health, look after your mental health, look after your families. Thank you all for watching, I appreciate all the support, and I'll see you all in the next video. But until then, stay safe and God bless.